All right. Hey, welcome to Wednesday nights. We are discussing some Bible stories that make us go, what? And sometimes we give a hook that says, hey, here's why this is an interesting story. We don't have to do that tonight because here are the verses that we're talking about. They're 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 23 and 24. He went up there to Bethel. This is talking about Elisha, who Scott's going to explain a little bit in a few minutes. And so it goes up from there to Bethel, and he was going up on the road, and small boys came out of the city and mocked him, and they said, "Go up, Baldy, go up, Baldy." He turned around and he saw them and put them down in Yahweh's name, and two bears came out of the forest and mauled 42 of the boys. And then, just get right back to the action, he went from there to Mount Carmel, and from there he came back to Samaria. So,
So I have to say, this has kind of always been one of my favorite passages. When I was about 19, I started thinning. So I relate to Elisha here and the desire to call down some she bears. But Elijah and Elisha are, would you call Elisha Elijah's protege?
yes.
Yes. Okay. So Elijah in chapter 2 gets taken up. And that's a pretty famous passage. We've probably done
Sure.
a handful of VBSs
Chariots
on
of
that.
fire, right?
Chariots of Fire. It's a big thing. Elisha takes on Elijah's role as prophet for Israel. Elisha is going to try to get. He's trying to get Israel back on track. He's trying to redeem them. He's trying to get them to do what they're supposed to do, so they don't get turned over for a worse fate. And so Elisha actually asked Elijah for a double portion of his spirit. I think that is granted. I think that he is going to be given the ability to do exactly what God wants him to do. If we look at verse 15, we see Elisha as he comes back into Jericho following Elijah's chariots of fire up to the heavens. The It's the sons of the prophets who were at Jericho saw him, and they come down to him and they say, let's go find Elijah. He says, there's no need. They say, well, we've got all these men to go look for him. Let's do it. They go out, they look, they come back. We can't find him. Elisha says, I told you so. And then they say, basically, they're going to get him to prove himself as a prophet. And they say, we've got these waters here in Jericho. Everything is going great, except for these waters are killing us. They're polluted. Yeah. They're causing miscarriages and deaths. And Elijah makes those new. And so we have him leaving Jericho, doing this healing of the waters, which is probably pretty important. And he goes into Bethel, where we have this happen that you already read for us. These boys come down, call him Baldy. He curses them. They get attacked by bears. So what do you make out of that?
Well, that's a pretty good question. There's a lot I think you can make out of this. I think a couple of things you got to say is this, I think, does show the importance of taking seriously what God is doing. This Elijah is a man of God, and Elisha is following in his footsteps. I think the whole story is painted in a way to show that this is all about this man of God coming of age and taking over what Elijah was doing. And so Elijah did a lot of things in his life and in his ministry. He's the guy that gets depressed at times. He calls down fire on people at other times. But this story in and of itself is one where you got people who are, and I think you're going to elaborate a little more on this, but they're either not respecting him or not taking him seriously, or they're not, recognizing him as a mouthpiece and a spokesman for God. And so they kind of mock him a little bit at least. And he places some kind of curse on these kids. And then the next thing you know, you got a couple of bears who are mauling these people. Let me back up and say, I said kids, and the way that it was written in the translation I used had little kids or small children. But this is a word that very well doesn't mean children. It could mean young adults. It could probably mean, I don't know about your age, but it could mean a person who's my age, probably. It can be a young adult, young adult person who's acting pretty childish. But this is not a Bible story about God, destroying a bunch of little kids because they made a comment.
So maybe not my age, but acting like you. Is that what you just said?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think these are little kids. Some of the commentaries I've read have said that these could be kids anywhere from 12 to 30 years old. So I think it's little and small could be used to maybe describe better their maturity level or maybe even their insignificance.
Yeah.
This may be a way of the author kind of taking a swipe at them for what they do here. And they're coming down, and there's a few different ways I think that we can take what they do. Why do they call him Baldy? I'll say one. I'll let you say what you think it is, but there's a couple of different ways I think that we can take it. One of them is it could have been a comparison game that they're playing with Elijah. Elijah was known for being hairy. He had long hair. I think he had a lot of hair all over, and so he was hairy. And so by them coming down and simply saying "baldy" or "you bald dude," um, they're insulting him, almost maybe comparing him to Elijah and saying you're not the prophet that Elijah was. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that makes as much sense as anything else to me. There's, this could be there was in the Old Testament, there was this idea of the Nazirite vow, which was, if you're going to totally dedicate yourself to God, a razor is not going to touch any of the hair on your body. And maybe this is them painting him saying, you're the farthest thing from a man of God that we could ever think of. And so, bald is the opposite of, razors never touched your head. And so whatever they're doing, they are totally disrespecting him as he attempts to take on the work of God.
I've got to say that bald wasn't always as beautiful as it is today.
There we go.
I'm glad I got that in. I actually wrote that down and made sure I was going to say that. I was thinking about Mark Fenton and some others that we can relate to that. One of the things that is interesting is that Bethel is the place that they're at. And Bethel is supposed to be the house of God. That is its designation. But during the time of the kings, Bethel becomes one of the temples for idol worship. It's a place where they were trying to keep them from going to the other kingdom and worshiping in Jerusalem. And so Bethel is probably enjoying a little bit of prosperity from being a worship center, a tourist attraction of sorts. I think they're enjoying some prosperity. And it could be that these kids come down to jeer at Elisha because they don't want to see change in their city.
Yeah.
That could be one of the things, maybe even one of the big takeaways from this is these guys probably don't want to see the judgment that Elisha is going to pronounce on them.
Yeah.
And so they come down and they jeer him. So that's an interesting setting of where they are when this happens.
Yeah. And when they tell him, go up, oh bald head, they're actually saying, go away. They're saying, we don't want to hear from you. We don't want to hear anything. So I'm going to go into where I think this leads and then let you finish up. Okay. And I know we're going to be at odds a little bit. So they say, all right, you're not the man of God. You're no Elijah. There's no way you're doing the work of God. This has got to be fake. You just get on out of here going up, bald head. Well, when things like this happen to Elijah, he calls down fire and burns up all the prophets of Baal. And when things like this happen to Elisha, he puts a curse on these folks, and there are a couple of bears that come out and eat all the people. But it doesn't say eat. It says they mauled all of these people. When Jeremiah is having a lot of folks who are not listening to his message and are disregarding him and not taking him very seriously, Jeremiah is a guy that strips down naked. God has him take his clothes off and put a gallows, whatever it is, puts it around his neck, and it's just a big sign of the burdens that the people have. When Jonah doesn't have things go his way, he says, I'm going the opposite direction. And so my point is, there are a lot of prophets in the Old Testament who had great messages and did great things. Some of them wrote entire books. Some of them we look back at, like Elijah shows up here, and then the next time we see him is going to be at the transfiguration of Jesus, whenever he's there on the mountaintop experience with Moses, Jesus, and Elijah. But when it came to daily life, and it came to daily ministry with Jesus, and the disciples would say things, we've been rejected. The Samaritan village, for instance, has rejected us. Should we do like Elijah did and call down fire from heaven and destroy them? Well, Jesus says, no, that was appropriate at that point in history. But when Jesus has come and has brought this new kingdom on earth, the church, those things don't make sense anymore. And so this wrathful approach that you may see from Elijah, or this cursing that you see from Elisha, Jesus says, we didn't come to curse these people. We came to save these people. And so lest we think that we have like a, kind of a get out of jail free card here that says, hey, I can say what I want to say about people when they reject God. This is not what this is. This is not well, we need to call down fire from heaven on these folks, or we need to do what all the old prophets did. This is not at all what's appropriate for today's world. Our model for ministry is not Jeremiah or Jonah or Elisha or Elijah. Our model for ministry this is the easy answer. Is who? It's Jesus. You didn't answer it. Okay, it's Jesus. Yeah, it's Jesus. Yeah, it's our model for ministry is Jesus. And his model is, you know what? Yeah, preach the gospel and teach people and tell people the story of Jesus. And if they don't listen, that's on them. It's appropriate to shake our dust off our feet and go to more fruitful fields at some point. But a hateful approach, a condemning approach doesn't seem to be appropriate for those of us who are trying to model the life of Jesus in our lives. And so I'm going to say that's my takeaway right now. You want to bring her home?
I agree with you on the takeaway for today. I do think that for Elisha, this is one way in which he got across to these 42 youths that he was serious, and that God was serious, and that God was using him. Whether or not we had 42 funerals or not that day, I don't know. But that was 42 people that were impacted by this, and they would have known that God was going to work through Elisha. Because when Elisha cursed them, God sent she-bears to take care of business. I also think it should be noted that we shouldn't make fun of bald people. I feel like I gotta say that here.
I think that's adding to the text.
I don't know.
We speak where the Bible speaks.
It said she-bears for calling them bald-headed. But anyways, I do think that this was a way that God used wildlife to teach a lesson, that this is a sample of the judgment that you may face, or that you will face if you don't turn and come back. 2 Chronicles 36:16, we read that they kept ridiculing God's messengers, despising his words and scoffing at his prophets. And there was condemnation for that. And so while today, I think we teach in love, and we show grace, and we preach the gospel message of Christ. Elisha was a different time, and that was a time in which, in this instance, he was showing a nation that was so far from God what God could do, and a smaller judgment, so that they could avoid a full force judgment. There's a lot in these few verses. It's pretty interesting stuff.
It's pretty good stuff.
She-bears make you go what?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take it on. So we're glad that you've joined us tonight. I've enjoyed looking at some of these stranger passages, and it's always amazing when you dig in what you can pick up, and some of the messages that are there, and some of the most obscure texts. This may be one of the more obscure ones.
Gotta be.
So with that, we're going to tell you good night, and hope that you've enjoyed this time together.
Have a good one.